What defines a soul? Some call it the spark within that fights the darkness, that burns for life itself. But what of death, who became the Reaper on the day he slaughtered the Nephilim? He killed his brother, his comrades, and Absalom. Death! Why do you slay your own?
The Nephilim have no claim to Eden.
There are realms for angels and demons. Why not for us?
Eden belongs to man.
It belongs to those who take it! The eons have not answered the question. Was it worth it? Brother. That one moment begot corruption and crowned him kinslayer. The bitter victory could not be undone.
Hey guys, you got Crave here with a review of Darksiders 2. So as with my Darksiders 1 review, this is also in preparation for the release of Part 3. Part 2 is all about Horseman Death. I find the oldest of the Horsemen to be the most fascinating given the information available about the 4. So let's talk about this game, going over its plot, graphics and audio, and eventually its gameplay. The story of Death is sort of a continuation of Darksiders 1, but it actually runs somewhat alongside the first game. Again, it's about the oldest of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. You are introduced to the game in a very stylish manner, backed by an awesome musical score, which we'll get into in a bit. The basic goal is to find redemption for your brother War, who has been accused of triggering the End War, or the final battle between the 3 kingdoms of heaven, man and hell. This unscheduled start, or the final war, doomed humanity to near extinction. So for Death to redeem his brother, he has to find a way to resurrect humanity as payment for War's freedom. While simple, it is the execution of the story that makes the plot very interesting. We'll go over the audio part and the execution later, but the story takes you on an adventure to different places, and to a grander adventure actually compared to part 1 of the series. You learn more about the different worlds, realities, and personalities involved. You'll also learn more about what happened and how the other realities were affected by the End War, and what eventually happened to the souls of men. Heaven was better expanded upon in this game compared to the first. Darksiders 2 simply did it better than Game 1. One thing that may be a big letdown is the way the game ended. The finality aspect of the arc is there, but it felt very abrupt. You get the impression that it was rushed like Knights of the Old Republic 2, but it wasn't so bad that it destroyed the whole experience. Graphics. Personally, it looks better than Darksiders 1, but it's still somewhat similar. There are more options on the PC though, and that's something I will always appreciate in any game. The ultimate form, or Death's Reaper form, is definitely better implemented. There is more detail compared to War's Chaos form. The form, along with the finisher animation, has a more menacing appearance to it. Death's Scythe or Scythe animations look so much better and has a certain or better finality to it. The landscapes in Darksiders 2 are more expansive compared to the first game. A majority of War's adventure felt very enclosed, while this one felt more open. There is more detail lent to the environment and it looks really good. Minus the revisit to Earth, the latter portions of the game look really amazing for a dated title. In addition, the weapons and armor pieces also look good, but I guess when you compare that to Darksiders 1, it can't really be helped because you were sort of limited in terms of the items you could acquire in the first game. The effects are also much better compared to game number 1. The ability effects from Death are more obvious. There is, however, a progression in terms of graphics in the game. It only gets better as you progress or as you move forward in the story, where you begin to unlock other worlds that you can visit. Audio-wise, Darksiders 2 is awesome. The voice acting for the Horseman fits his character. You can see his persona shine through the voice acting. There is a subtle terror in his lines, but it isn't exactly brooding or wildly delivered. It just fits the persona of someone who embodies death. Combat sounds are fairly standard, but the background music for every scene is really top-notch in the game. The opening background music, it's called The Maker's Guardian, lends an air of adventure and purpose. It makes you feel like you're really going to be part of the whole thing where Death has to redeem his brother.
he would resurrect humanity. But he knew not how this might be done. And so Death rode forth into the icy veil to find the Keeper of Secrets.
Gameplay-wise, you pretty much get the same experience as with War's Journey. From an overall action/platforming game standpoint, it's one of the better ones. There is a healthy balance of both scenarios, and you are made to focus on each aspect of the game. If you're meant to mow down hordes of mobs, platforming doesn't become an issue. If you are in a room where you have to figure out a sequence of puzzles, there won't be any baddies to worry about except for maybe 1 or 2 inconsequential kills. The platforming isn't anything too difficult, but it doesn't mean it isn't a challenge. Much like Darksiders 1, you have to observe how objects or platforms behave before you actually get to solve them. Some things may be more obvious for veterans of the format. You'll see the usual locked doors, which means searching for keys in certain sections of the game. Parts like these never get boring, and it really just adds to the overall appeal of the game. Combat-wise, Death's movements feel faster as opposed to War's. Sure, you have slow two-handed weapons, but it's the dual scythe attacks that make it seem like Death moves faster. In terms of the abilities you can use, Death has a limited pair of ability trees that he can allocate points to. You've got your tree dedicated to Death's more physical related abilities, and another that has a stronger emphasis on magic and summons. Items also enhance Death's attacks and toughness, so the game follows the standard color system which indicate the relative contribution to the strength of your character. It's still best to look at the individual stat contributions to, well, basically get the most out of your character. Lastly, there are weapons in the game tagged as possessed, and these weapons are the things that you want to watch out for, especially if you get the perfect rolls. Feed them with the stats you need that fit your playstyle, and you're going to end up with a horseman Death that is just basically unstoppable. Now, taking on mobs and standard bosses are fun, however there are some bosses that feel underwhelming. The final boss of the game in particular was a strange one. He looked really good for the final act of the game. His damaging abilities really pummel you. His attacks cover a relatively large arc and were quite punishing if they connect. I think it was the mechanics of the final boss fight that were a bit disappointing. So, in addition to what I mentioned earlier, the abruptness of the final sequence and now when I'm mentioning the boss mechanics, it was really just a weird way to end the game. Don't get me wrong, it doesn't do much to detract from the awesomeness of Darksiders 2, but it's just something that you notice. But, to sum it up, Darksiders 2 is a must-have for any Darksider fan or anyone who appreciates the action platforming genre. It's an improvement over the first game and by itself is a great preparation for the release of Darksiders 3. It really just holds up very well even in 2018. So, you got Crave here, and thanks for watching.